I am happy to be joined with the Chief Medical Officer of Numinus, Dr. Evan Wood. How are you, sir? And great to finally have you on the Dales Report.
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, another busy week, I assume, in the psychedelic industry. This industry continue obviously to grow at a rapid pace, but I guess the first question I want to ask is, when you look at the industry as a whole, how much advancement do you think that we have made over the past year? Because it seems to be that a lot of attention has been drawn to this industry, especially over the past 6 months.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been a huge amount of interest, and I think a lot of it is in Canada, where we are, where the Health Canada has signaled its willingness to look at some of these things, allowing for people to be accessing through this Section 56 mechanism, selected patients to get access to psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy outside of research trials.
Yeah.
They've also allowed therapists to use psilocybin as part of their training outside of research trials. So there's different companies that have come into the space looking at synthetic psilocybin, or obviously MAPS is the longest standing player in the space, and it's now moved its phase 3 trial through to completion. My lab at UBC was a participating site in that trial, and it's already in the public domain. The initial data anyway looks very, very positive, building upon 6 phase 2 trials. So
wow,
a lot of interest in the space and a lot of momentum, I think.
Do you mind me asking, when you say you see a lot of positive things, what does that mean?
Well, I think there's clear signals from regulators, and the market generally to support this industry. I think they're not going to be making, special exception to these therapies coming forward. But I don't think we're seeing the same kind of political headwinds that we're seeing, for instance, with medical cannabis, where, particularly in the US, but even in Canada, where we now have legal recreational marijuana nationally. But even in Canada, there were, political headwinds depending where you sat on the political spectrum. Whereas I think because of the wisdom of groups like MAPS and having veterans and first responders be prioritized for their post-traumatic stress disorder trials, or generally the fact that we do have kind of a sucking chest wound in our society in terms of mental health challenges, and the psychedelics not having the same baggage as cannabis and medical cannabis. So I think that the prohibition of cannabis was wrong. Don't get me wrong. And I think that the political opposition was wrong and misguided. But when it comes to the psychedelic space, I just don't see that. I think there's reason for optimism.
Do you think that what are some of the things you think we've learned from it all, from the cannabis rollout versus where we are now?
I wasn't involved in the cannabis industry at all. I'm before joining Numinus full time, I was a professor of medicine at the University of British Columbia and a Tier 1 Canada research chair. I was the executive director of something called the BC Centre on Substance Use, a large university faculty of medicine center. And we were involved in a host of things, trying to bring a public health and safety framework to substance use policy. And so my role in cannabis was trying to help policymakers understand that the prohibition of cannabis wasn't making anyone safer. Young people have free and easy access to cannabis under prohibition, and all it really does is enrich organized crime and lead to gang violence. And that's part of the challenges with drug prohibition writ large. It also results in the consequence that we don't study the therapeutic aspects of things. So you mentioned the last year with psychedelics, but psychedelic research goes back to the 1950s and 60s that showed great promise. But because of this notion of a war on drugs, that totally got put on the shelf for a long time. And, the light was kept on by groups at Hopkins and by MAPS. But really that the light is being shone on that research to show how promising it was. And I think it's more promising than anything else in the mental health space right now.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating information. I want to talk specifically about Numinus. You're looked at as an industry leader for delivering development of psychedelic therapies through operating labs and clinics across the country. If someone were to ask me about your contributions to the company and the advancements that you provide, how would you best explain that?
Well, Numinus is kind of two businesses. So there's the laboratory, and we were the first Health Canada licensed laboratory to grow and extract psilocybin from psilocybin mushrooms. There's a whole laboratory activity that's been very busy on that front. And then we also have a number of clinics we recently acquired a mental health organization called Mindspace,
Mm-hmm.
a really amazing group that was doing incredible mental health work already. They have a clinic network in Quebec. We have a clinic in Vancouver as well that in many respects is the test kitchen for readying for when regulations change that will enable the widespread use of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy as part of a normal part of the mental health care system, which I think in the future, when phase 3 trials are complete,
Yep.
already we have things like ketamine assisted psychotherapy, which is used off label, but has very good evidence actually in terms of the treatment of a number of mental disorders, including depression. And there's considerable literature around substance use disorder or addiction as well with ketamine assisted psychotherapy. So it's just a really exciting area. And if you actually look at the evidence for existing mental health treatments,
Right.
SSRI antidepressants being the classic example, evidence-based medicine practitioners that really look at those clinical trials that got those drugs approved kind of scratch their head and say, wow, there's no home run benefit of these drugs. And if you look at the real world experience with patients, most patients don't like taking them. They,
No.
lead to erectile dysfunction, weight gain.
For sure.
People do not like how it feels to be on these drugs, which you have to take every day. If you compare that to the psychedelic experience, for instance, the psilocybin trials for depression or other use disorders, like upwards of 70% of people say it's one of the top 5 spiritual experiences they've ever had in their lives.
It's incredible,
and they want to tell their friends and family about it. So you've got on the one hand something that doesn't look like it works very well, and it has side effects. People don't like taking it. You have this other thing that looks incredibly promising. It looks safe, and people, really appreciate the experience and rank it as something very highly and meaningful towards them. So you put that alongside the mental health challenges we're facing as a society, and it's kind of a perfect storm for the development of a new industry. And in Numinus, we feel like we're a leader amongst the group in terms of the number of things that we're doing.
Why Numinus? When they spoke to you and began conversations, and we talk about differentiation as far as one company to the other, but what was it about Numinus that you believed in?
Yeah, like I said, I've been working in the substance use area for years, better than 2 decades, and I'm a specialist physician that works in this area as well clinically. I've seen personally people that have gone to Costa Rica and done ayahuasca, and they come back through my clinic office door, and it's like you don't even recognize them. They've gone through this kind of transformative change. As I mentioned, my lab was a participating site in the MAPS phase 3 trial, so a line of sight there and looking at the literature being published from elsewhere. So that was a big part of it. And then the people at Numinus as well, right? Our CEO is a really smart individual who has kind of an origin story where he was struggling with some major medical challenges and availed himself of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and he's the picture of health now. And the group that was just assembled, our chief operating officer was actually the architect and the person that helped implement the cannabis regulatory framework for all of British Columbia. Stacey Wallen, our chief strategy officer, has been involved in a huge number of different industries in a leadership capacity. Our medical director, Dr. Devin Christie, trained by MAPS and has a whole history of work in this area. So it's just a group of people that was really excited to get involved with. It wasn't a super conscious decision. It just kind of evolved into an opportunity. And I really think that there's an opportunity to really transform mental health care right now. We don't have good treatments. We have huge needs. And here's something that I don't think is going to be a small incremental gain. When we go from a symptom management approach with daily medications, with medications that don't work that well, to something that you can approach mental health with curative intent. And what I mean by that is if you look at the MAPS MDMA trials as an example, at a year after the treatment ended, 70% of people roughly no longer met the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder.
It's incredible.
They no longer have the disorder. I mean, we don't have anything like that at all.
We don't hear enough about that either, do we?
Pardon me?
We don't hear enough about that either, do we?
Yeah, I mean, if just as a, I have a PhD in epidemiology as well as my medical training, so I look at this research from an implementation science perspective and what it really means if we were to develop clinics and businesses that could get involved in this space to meaningfully change the lives of people that are suffering with these disorders, and it looks incredibly promising. So
That's
that's
great.
kind of where our strategy revolves.
That's great. I want to talk about the special access program. Currently, if you're a healthcare professional, you can request a drug that is not available for sale in Canada. This is through the special access program. So it's my understanding that your relationship with Health Canada has been a very important one to their rethinking of this special access program. Can you tell my viewers a little bit more of the evolution of it all and how receptive Health Canada has been towards it?
Yeah, I mean, this actually goes back to 2013, where under the former federal government, the Special Access Drug Program, which essentially, if you can envision someone with cancer that's run out of treatment options, and then there's some new drug that's come along, but it's not yet approved by Health Canada, you can apply for access to that through the Special Access Drug Program. But in 2013, the currently illegal drugs like psilocybin and like MDMA were struck off the list of drugs that you could possibly request through the Special Access Program. So in terms of developing relationships with Health Canada, as I mentioned, I'm a professor of medicine at UBC. I routinely interact with the federal government for various policy reasons, and brought to their attention, and amongst others, that actually this change that was made in 2013 is in violation of some international ethical guidelines, or something called the Declaration of Helsinki, that says if
Okay.
someone volunteers their time to participate in a clinical trial, let's say a cancer trial, and
Yep.
at the end the doctor said, you could use another round of treatment with this, but the trial's over, so they wouldn't be able to access it. And that's actually in violation of the
Wow.
Declaration of Helsinki.
Really?
So the moves that Health Canada is making now to revise the special access program to allow the psychedelics to be requested through that, at least they've signaled their intent. I should be very clear. Health Canada posted a notice of intent to change that program and welcomed public consultation. That
Right.
public consultation period has now closed. I know that a number of organizations, including our own, including MAPS, including USONA, contributed to that to encourage them to make that change. It will simply enable individuals and their patients, if this change goes through, to be considered for a special access exemption to Canada's drug laws to be able to access these medications for therapeutic use. But it'll be limited to individual patients and those with serious life-threatening illness. So it'll just be a modest policy reform, but it'll bring Canada in line with international ethical
Right.
guidelines, and
Yeah.
a little bit different than the U.S. Expanded Access Program, which has additional limitations. So something that I'm proud of that Canada's doing, and certainly the health minister should be commended for doing so.
It sounds incredible. Want to talk again about Numinus through your license with Health Canada. What does the license enable you to do that other companies in the space cannot?
Well, essentially, it enables us to handle a whole host of psychedelics, DMT, MDMA, psilocybin, LSD. The company essentially has a license to handle and to research, to be able to import those or distribute them. It's a dealer's license as well. So other groups that want to research these substances, we can import them and sell them. And essentially, it enables our laboratory to undertake research in this area. And it's funny, we have an amazing lab director who always says, we're not a mushroom company, and we're
Right.
not. We're interested in all the psychedelics and delivering various psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies. And although the lab was the first to grow and extract mushrooms, they have a license that enables research with a host of different molecules. And I should mention, the Numinus lab isn't some sort of new thing that, okay, let's rent a space and say we're creating a lab. That lab has been operating for over 10 years. Previously, it was a company called Salvation Botanicals. The
Okay.
PhD scientists and experts with a host of expertise in doing the type of extractions from psilocybin mushrooms that we're actively doing right now. So there's a whole kind of intellectual property strategy related to the growing, extraction, and formulation from mushrooms that team is working on.
That's incredible. Last thing I want to ask you, and we'll leave it off with this. How excited, I guess, are you for the future of this industry, knowing that the most important thing is to, obviously improve people's lives better. But how excited are you to like look at this industry and the growth, and more specifically the company of Numinus?
Yeah, in terms of Numinus, I think we've got a really good strategy. I'm super excited about Numinus. I am seeing, new companies coming into the space all the time. And Numinus's perspective is we want to collaborate. We're focused on patient access, and anything that can improve access, we welcome. But I do think that, there's going to have to be a lot of thoughtful approach taken for companies to be successful in this space, and moving very methodically with eyes wide open around the regulations and having a good business plan. Because I just think that we're still some time away, and work is required before psychedelics go mainstream. That's gonna take time, and regulators are gonna require that companies like ours have the appropriate licensing and work through the existing policy vehicles to make that possible. And that's really where we have a quite grounded long-term strategy.
Important to know, that's for sure. Numinus Wellness Inc. trades on the TSX Venture under the ticker symbol NUMI. Dr. Evan Wood, I appreciate your time for joining us, and please keep in touch. This has been great.
Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, take care.